This is our last section of Chapter 2, Section 2.5, Writing Equations of Lines. In Section 2.4, we had equations, and from those equations we graph them. Now, for this section, we're going to have pieces of information about the equations, and we have to figure out what the equation is. So we're going to start off with an example. Example 1, what's the equation of a line that has a slope of 2/3 and a y-intercept of -12? Now this is something you are probably used to doing. You've got a slope and you've got a y-intercept, and slope-intercept is one of the most common forms that you would recall from Algebra 1. So it's y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and the slope is 2/3. And the y-intercept is b, and that's -12. So this is pretty much a recap of the last lesson and the one before as well. So y equals 2/3 x minus 12. So over here in this one we have a picture, and it's pretty much the same question, different numbers and everything, but you have pretty much the same information. This is your y-intercept, and at the y-intercept, the x value is 0. The x value is 0. And your b value, your y-intercept, is -2. b equals -2 for that. And your slope can be found by going from this point to another intersection. If you didn't have this arrow that said 3 and that arrow that said 4, you'd look here and go, nope, that doesn't hit at a grid line on the graph paper, nor does that, neither does that. But this one does. You would find that point yourself, and you go, what's it take to get from this point to that point? Rise 3, run 4. So the slope is rise 3, run 4, and it goes up to the right, so it's positive. So there's my slope, there's my y-intercept, pretty much the same information I have in that equation. So my answer would be y equals 3/4 x minus 2. Okay, hang in there because it's going to get a little bit more challenging. So you have two linear forms so far in this chapter. One of the most common that I just mentioned in the last page was slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And we've also had a couple of questions where we've had standard linear form. 2 units ago we had to write something in standard linear form and solve something from standard linear form, and in the last section we learned how to graph using the post-it method or the intercepts method, which works all the time except for when c equals 0. Well, we do have one more form. It is probably the least commonly remembered, but it's a pretty useful form, point-slope form, and as the name would indicate, the information you know is going to be a point and the slope. Now the slope should be pretty easy to identify. It's the same letter as it was in slope-intercept form. So the slope is m, but the point is, well, here's the y-coordinate of that point. See, it's got a subscript, sub 1, whereas this doesn't. This y is going to be a y, typically. And here is my x-coordinate for that point. So my point is x sub 1, comma, y sub 1, and my slope is m. Okay, magic. This question just appeared. What is an equation of a line that passes through the point 1, -4, and has a slope of 1/3? Well, we're given the information of a slope, 1/3, and a point, 1, -4. So when we're given a point and a slope, it's so easy to use point-slope form. And when we're done with putting it in point-slope form, let's just stop. Okay, you'll see what I mean in just a second. Now, one thing we want to watch out for is in the point-slope form, there's these negatives right here and right here. Now, they're in the form. So here's what it's going to look like. The y is y, and then minus from the equation, that minus right there, and then y sub 1 is -4, so it's minus a -4. And I'm going to simplify that before I go on. Minus a negative is add. In general, you could think of this as an opposite sign. So I look at that and it's negative, well, it becomes plus. Now my slope is over here, it's 1/3. and then times the quantity. So I got the quantity in the form. X is x, and then minus my x sub 1, and my x sub 1 is 1. So y plus 4 equals 1/3 times the quantity x minus 1. And that's it. Just stop right there. You don't have to put it into slope-intercept form. Many students do. If I don't ask you to, don't bother, okay? I know this is the most common form. It's the one you're going to remember the most, but it's okay to leave your answer like this if I don't tell you that you have to have your answer in a certain form. So let's just be done with that. So here's another example. What's the equation of a line with a slope of 1/5 that passes the point 6,5? Now both these coordinates are negative, so it's going to look like this. Y minus the y coordinate of 5 equals, the slope is 1/5. Don't forget the quantity. X minus the the x coordinate is 6, and that's it. We're done. Okay, so what about the parallel and perpendicular lines? We could have questions that say, all right, it goes through a certain point, but I don't want it to go through this particular line. I want it to be parallel to that line, or in this case, perpendicular. And by the way, the symbol for perpendicular is this upside down T, if you don't know that already. Here's a picture of my favorite superhero from when I was a boy. His name is Iron Fist. That has nothing to do with math, but I just kind of like the cool art. Alright, so from here we get that the slope is -3. So we learned that if you have perpendicular lines, their slopes are opposite reciprocal. So my new slope, I'll call it m sub nu, if I could write that small with this pen. Okay, looks alright. Is going to be opposite, so that is a negative, so the new slope will be positive, and then I reciprocate 3. We'll make 3 over 1, like this, and reciprocate it, and it becomes 1/3. And the negative's gone because of the opposite, and reciprocate. So my new slope is 1/3, and now I have this point, -4, 3. So it's pretty much just like the last problem, except I had to think about it a little bit more. Identify the slope. This is in y equals mx plus b form, so the slope is just something I can look at and find. Say it's -3. So it's perpendicular, take its opposite reciprocal. So take that slope, take that point, and plug it into point slope form. Y minus 3 equals 1/3 times the quantity x plus 4. Plus 4. Why? Because it was minus a -4. The minus from the form, the -4 from there, minus a negative is positive. So here is my answer. Okay, so hopefully you start to get used to this after some examples. Well, that was an example about perpendicular. Here's one about parallel. What's the equation of a line that passes through 5, 2 and is parallel to y minus 2 equals 3 times the quantity x plus 1? Now this is a different form than the last one. Okay, the last one was in y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form. This is in point slope form, but still, in both of those forms, the m is just in a certain spot hanging out, and you can just go identify it. So this has a slope of 3. Well, parallel, and the symbol for parallel looks like a pair of L's, or an equal sign turned on its side. Parallel lines have the same slope. So my new slope, m sub nu, is equal to 3 again. Same slope as this line is parallel to. So, just like last time, point slope form, y minus 2 equals, the slope is 3, times the quantity x minus 5. We're cruising. This form is, I know, not as easy to remember as some of the others because you probably haven't used it as much, but boy, it is easy to put it into that form. And it's so easy to leave it and not do extra math, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, this guy right here, that's Captain Caveman. Ask Dr. Green about his Captain Caveman impressions. He does a really good one. Alright, give an equation of a line that passes through 8, 1 and 5, 5. Okay, I don't just have a point, I've got 2 points, but I don't have a slope at all. But that's okay. You know how to find slope. The slope equation is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And it doesn't matter which one you pick as your first point. So let's say that this is my y sub 2. So that's going to be 5 minus 1 over 5 minus 8. So 5 minus 1 is 4. 5 minus 8 is negative 3. Don't leave the negative in the denominator. Simplify your slope. Bring the negative off to the side or up to the top. Negative 4/3 is my slope. Now, pick a point. Which point you going to pick? It doesn't really matter. If you and your neighbor pick two different points, you'll look like you have two different answers. So, y minus 5 equals negative 4/3 x minus 5. Since I had a repeated coordinate here, meaning my x and my y coordinate were the same, then these numbers, they'll look the same too. So that was one possible answer. And if I use the 8-1, it'll look like this. Y minus 1 equals negative 4/3 x minus 8. So either one of those is a perfectly good answer, and they're both right. Are they different? Well, they look different, but they are equivalent. And I'll show you that in just a second. Alright, so I've done a little work on these to try and show you that these two answers are equivalent. You know, in the past few slides I've said let's just stop, let's not do any more work and put it into slope-intercept form. Let's just leave it in point-slope form. Well, when students have a problem with that, it's like when they have homework problems and I read the answers and I say, you could have got this, or you could have got this. But you could have gotten something else if you would have changed forms. And I think, honestly, that's why some textbooks or teachers want you to put it into slope-intercept form, because everybody will look like they have the same answer. Okay, so here's the work I did. I distributed the negative 4/3, and it becomes negative 4/3 x plus 20/3. Numerator to numerator, denominator to denominator. So 5 over 1, you'd multiply negative 4 times negative 5, and that's positive 20. You multiply 3 times 1, and that's 3. So top to top, bottom to bottom. Multiplying fractions is easy. Then the next step in green, I added 5 to both sides, but it doesn't appear over here as 5. 5 needs to be added to 20/3, and I need a common denominator. Adding fractions isn't quite as nice. I'm going to change the 5 into 15/3. So that's where I left that one off. Let's go over here. Same color coordinated steps. With the red, I'm just distributing the negative 4/3. So negative 4/3 x plus 32/3. That says 32/3. Negative 4 times negative 8 is positive 32. 3 times 1 is 3. Then in the green step, I'm adding 1 to both sides, but it's got to be added to 32/3, so I make it 3/3. So let's take a look at those two fractions that will add and these two fractions that will add. Everything else looks the same, right? Y equals negative 4/3 x plus this. Y equals negative 4/3 x plus this. So I add the 20 and the 15, and that's 35/3. I add the 32 and the 3, and that's 35/3. So y equals negative 4/3 x plus the 32/3 is another answer, just like these two blue answers, that you could have gotten. So you see that either of those blue answers is going to be fine. Okay, so that is it for video 1, where I led you through a bunch of examples. Now what I want you to do is look at all the try this problems. There's 5 of them. Try to do them yourself. When you are done with them, play the next video and I'll go through them with you step by step.